All right, then we'll get started. Howdy, everybody. Good afternoon. So this is our latest CBSi college presentation. Erica and I work on the Innovation and Partnerships team. If you guys haven't met us in the past, and back in Q1, we gave a little bit of a recap on some of the trends that we saw coming out of CES. And so what our goal has been is quarterly coming in and talking to you guys about the trends that we're kind of seeing out in the marketplace. And so this is a deck that we had put together for the IM offsite about a month and a half ago, but we've tweaked it to be more sales focused. And it's all in the theme of Adventure Time. So if you haven't seen this cartoon, you'll be almost lost in terms of all the visuals, but have no fear, the content is not completely related to that as well. But it's called Adventure Time because it's a bit of a choose your own adventure as well. So we've got a couple different trends that we can talk about, and then you guys kind of shout out what is the most interest to you, and then we can dive into it from there. So the trends that we've got within this deck is one around Hal Knows Best, and that's around artificial intelligence and machine learning. Breaking from the Basement, which is about how the games industry is becoming more of a mass market from an audience perspective. The overall fact around how users are taking more control of their data overall is the third one. The next one is around cause-based marketing and how more companies are really looking to stand for something out there with their advertising. The power of voice and how that's becoming the new search. And then 5G and IoT, I call it Don't Be an Idiot, related to that, and then just overall next steps. So I don't know if there's one that's more of interest to anyone in the room. Shout out one thing other than next steps.
Hal Knows Best.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So we'll dive into this one. So each one is going to set up as why we think it's a trend, some of the marketing implications, and then what we want you guys to sell out there in the marketplace. So I'm sure you guys can't throw a stick right now without hitting some stat around artificial intelligence and machine learning. But everything that we're trying to focus on here is from a marketing perspective. And so you'll see in the stats, but a lot of companies are looking to really utilize AI to personalize the user experience, whether that's headlines within the copy, within their website or within their advertising, and even within like how that advertising is delivered to individuals as well. And there's a lot of plans that continue to incorporate this technology into how they're running their advertising, which is with the stat at the bottom slated as like the highest area of growth from any technology out there. So the implications of this from a marketing perspective is pretty significant. This can be around content creation, like I mentioned. So any of you guys that play fantasy football, you might get that email on Monday that kind of breaks down how your team did. A lot of those emails are just basically generated through AI, that it just basically, all those stats and whatnot are just kind of populated in there. But the overall theme of personalization is really key, so that if I am a big fan of the NHL and I go to CBS Sports to consume that content on a consistent basis, the future state would be that my homepage, if I type in CBS.com, is more geared to hockey content than Beats, who might be looking at more NFL content when she goes to CBS Sports. So that overall concept of looking at a large swath of information and really understanding the behaviors of an individual and then catering the content to that person is one of the main points. In the B2B space, which I know a lot of you guys sell, using machine learning to score leads and what their overall propensity is to convert. We work with a company named Bombora, who's done a lot in this space to understand all the behaviors that individuals are doing around researching a specific product or service like cloud computing, and then understanding like, okay, we feel like this person, based on their behavior patterns, is more apt to convert with a purchase against some cloud computing overall decision than another company that's not doing as much. So this sense of propensity models is also something based on artificial intelligence. And then just the way that we can optimize campaigns is another aspect of this as well. So we use a technology called Maxifier that utilizes machine learning to basically swap impressions between placements based on the overall KPI of a client. So that it's really taking the human element out of that and funneling the impressions towards the area that it's getting the best performance overall. So when we think about the overall things that you guys can be out there actively selling to clients, there's a number of things that Eric and I and the team have been working on over the last couple of months. Like one is working with Adam Leary and Eric Collier, which is they run an artificial intelligence and machine learning team within CBSi. So we have our own like mini product roadmap and working with them. One of the things that we've been talking about most recently is applying sentiment to the articles and the videos that we're serving and being able to like anti-target against certain topics or themes that clients are worried about being around. So if one of the use cases that's come up to us in the past, like when I was meeting with Charles Schwab, they said that we don't want to be against anything related to Trump, regardless of whether it's good or bad. Like in this new world, we can target away from those overall keywords or themes and just make sure that that additional like warm blanket of brand safety for that client is applied, so that we shouldn't miss out on any buys, because we can make sure that those ads are delivered in the right overall venues. Another area that we've been working on with the business intelligence team is dynamically creating audience segments based on a specific desired like category. So one of the things we've been running with T-Mobile is that we know that they're looking to convert people that have obviously a high propensity to signing up for their service and becoming a customer. We've gotten so much data from running their campaigns for the last couple of years that the BI team can now automatically create an audience segment of people that look like those converters. So they can say, okay, this pool of individuals have done the same actions as people in the past that have ended up converting and signing up for T-Mobile. So we can create this like lookalike model on the fly and be able to serve them T-Mo ads, because we know that they have a higher propensity to basically convert. And so we're looking to test that across other categories like TVs or laptops and whatnot down the line as well. And then really, like, we know that you guys asking about a client's KPI is something we've been beating you guys over the head with for a while. But just as I was talking about the Maxifier stuff, I feel like we're best set up versus how we have been in the past to really do well against clients that have a very aggressive direct response metrics for their campaigns. So just because we have more of that ability to standardize and create efficiency against like how we optimize against a campaign. So we've had the optimizer for a while, but that's been a crew of people really manually looking at like how they can move impressions and money between different placements. Now that we've got this additional tool behind us, like there's this ability to kind of do a lot of this on the fly and still hit overall goals. So just some things to keep in mind with clients that are interested in this space or looking to basically have like more aggressive KPIs against those. Any questions about?
So I know that T-Mo spends a ton of money with us, so we have like so many impressions, and we've been able to like track. They've allowed us to track on their site and all that stuff. Are there other clients that jump to mind? You don't have to say them, but like, do we have like a bunch of clients who sort of fall in that category where we've run a lot of ads with them? We've been able to track their, like our users going down their purchase funnel that could work for that?
Yeah, I think that we could even look at it from a category perspective. So even if we had several TV advertisers, like we could just look at it as a proxy at like click out data to then aggregate that up. So it's not just relying on one client kind of carrying the load. We can look at several clients within a category to kind of build that model as well. So I think if we were putting this specifically against like kind of the CNET umbrella, like our highest trafficked categories and ones with like consistently high sell-through, like the TVs and laptops and appliances, like those are the categories that I think are more apt to doing something like this versus like cameras, which only really get some investment towards like around Q4 every year. So yeah, I would say those higher volume ones, we could do this.
Cool. What's the process for the Maxifier?
Nothing. For anyone in sales, it's seamless and behind the scenes. So that's something that we would take care of, like between the client services team, the BI team, and integrated marketing. Once we know the overall KPI of a client, ideally, we would want to get a view as far down into that conversion process as possible. So sometimes having that ability to have a pixel on a client site would be ideal. There's still ways of working around it, while not as ideal, but I think that would be one thing that if you had a client that said that they had a very specific KPI, like registrations or sales, the next question I would ask is like, could we put our proprietary pixel there to like really drive optimization and make sure that we hit that for you? If they're adamantly against it, then we could set up kind of like a proxy for that, where as long as they were delivering us reporting information on a consistent basis, like through an automated report or something, through their DFA or whatnot report, so that we knew how well we were doing against something like a click to how that like leads to the eventual conversion. So yeah, I think it's just really knowing your client's KPIs and understanding their openness to embedding our pixel within the pages that signify the success.
Would this have to be something that we need to communicate to you guys before selling through? Or
Ideally, like I think in the RFP case, knowing that the KPI, I think that's the first point in time for us to really customize something that is, yeah, the best setup for success. So as soon as that RFP comes in, if it's not clear what the client's KPI is, then that would be one of the first questions on that kickoff call, and then updating the case or letting us know in advance, because that's what we're gonna like start moving forward with. But I know that, you know, there's obviously campaigns where that KPI suddenly shifts like mid-campaign, or like we find out that they say like that they're really focused on one thing, but then we find out we are being measured against something else. So if a client, I used to work on the agency side, I know I was guilty of this, is that, you know, our goal is brand awareness and driving sales. And it's like, well, what's the primary one? You know, like, so that's the conversation that I would try to have with the client, is like, what's most important to you? What's going to help us get that renewal the next time? And then that's what we then try to measure.
and so then because of that, because it does change so much, can we do that like mid-campaign?
As long as, I mean, that's not ideal, but like, let's say that we did all the due diligence up front, we thought we knew the client's primary KPI, and then they like basically pulled a 180 and said, okay, now we're going this way, then yeah, like if we could just then, I would basically conclude the tracking of like how many impressions we had delivered up until that point and almost start anew based on how we were tracking the performance from that new date when we would get the new pixel embedded, and then go from there. So we wouldn't measure the whole campaign against the new KPI, because that was what we were focused on.
Are there certain budgets or flights that are ideal for this, or like, are there certain things that we should have in mind before we pitch this?
No, I mean, I think, you know, with Optimizer, we have that spend threshold of like 250K over a span of 2 months. What we're trying to do here is like, I want us to be measuring almost any and every campaign. If it's like some small piddly like 25K buy, like maybe it's not worth our while to go through all the work. So, but we don't want anything to be prohibitive to you guys leaning into how we're being measured and knowing how well things are performing.
So this doesn't require like a ton of heavy lifting on our end to be doing this, we're just like
No.
basically anywhere.
Hey, Rick, would you mind repeating the question when it's being asked? We're having having trouble hearing it over here in Black Rock. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, we'll do.
Awesome, thanks.
Cool. Any other questions?
Quick question. So I know with the Optimizer, when clients buy quarter over quarter the same program, we kind of set up the same targeting as previous quarters. With Maxifier, can we use that, you know, segment as like rinse and repeat quarter over quarter and then move from there? Or do you think there would be like issues in scale if we start off with Maxifier from previous quarters?
Okay, so the question was, do we need to like basically start from scratch in the creation of audience segments when we do Optimizer with other clients, or if we're using this kind of new way moving forward, can we just leverage that same audience? Like, Amy, like, I don't think there's any problem with that, right? Like, no? Okay. So yeah, I would say that we can continue to use that. I think that would be the preference. I think it just, the only nuance there is if we're like with Timo, like we do a data share agreement. If we have something like that in place when we're charging the client on a per segment basis to leverage our first party data, like that's where we want to like create hard bookends in terms of like the time at which they're able to use that. but that would be the only limitation that I would see in terms of leveraging an audience segment and being able to kind of have that span quarters. All right. What's the next one? What do you guys want to cover next?
The data revolt.
All right. Erica, you want to cover this one?
Yep, I got it. And it's a great segue as we talk about optimizer and maxifier. So data, clearly a trend. I think every week there's an update in the trades about a new GDPR fine, or iOS is rolling out a new software update that eliminates some third-party tracking. So it's a constantly evolving topic, and one that we are definitely keeping a close eye on. And I think, you know, across the board, not only publishers, but our brands and consumers are all well aware of, you know, data management and data privacy. So I think many organizations are starting to take some of these regulations like GDPR, and instead of seeing them as something that's mandated, they're really trying to embrace them and using it as an opportunity to improve their own data management and privacy terms, as well as create new business models based off of those. And we are seeing like this, you know, increased focus on data security. So in 2018, the total number of data breaches actually dropped 20%. But I think the alarming part is that the number of like records, or the amount of information about consumers that was exposed, increased. So while the amount of data breaches decreased, all of us that were impacted actually increased 126%. So even with some of these regulations coming down in the European Union, it's still very scary for consumers and knowing that their data is out there. So it's something that, you know, we want to continue to be aware of and try to find solutions for. By the end of the year, it's expected that half of the world's companies are going to perform privacy impact assessments, but only 10% is automated. So they're going to do this time, look to make sure they're in line with all the regulations, but very few are going to continuously look at this and optimize based off of it. But I think with all of these changes, there's new opportunities. So we're starting to see some companies form that are giving back the power to individuals so that they can actually sell their data rather than having it be collected and sold without their knowledge. So the guy that invented the internet has actually started this company called Solid that will allow individuals to sell their data on their own behalf. So the marketing implications, I think, last year we went through the whole process to get compliant with GDPR. So that's in a good spot for CBS Interactive. There's a lot of other regulations coming down. You guys have probably heard about the CCPA, which is coming soon from California. A lot of other states in the US are looking at this, New York, Florida, Washington. We expect that it'll be across the board pretty soon. And I think that all of this is just making publishers and our clients more aware about it and just being smarter about the data that they're actually collecting and how they're using it. So in that respect, we do think that there's going to be, changes to IOs in that process and terms when we're using first and third party data. And most importantly, the lack of the third party data is going to become very challenging for clients. So we won't have all of these great third party audience segments regularly available, which means that our first party data is going to be really key to audience targeting. And then the last point is, we won't be able to say we told you so. So when these regulations come down, we'll have little time to actually get our house in order, which is why we're thinking and talking about this now and making sure that as a company, we're prepared for it. As an organization on the sales side, that we're able to talk to it and, talk our clients through this process. So for this, there's not actually anything to really pitch at this moment. We are working through with our legal team an FAQs doc. Amy's working through a bigger explanation on GDPR and CCPA and the impact of that on the business. So we're preparing all these materials for you guys so that you're more comfortable speaking about this with your clients when they ask. So that'll be coming down in the next few weeks. But what we just wanted you guys to know today is that cookies are going away, and that's really where most of these third-party data partners are collecting their data. So there's going to be a huge limitation on third-party data. But what that means is that this is an opportunity for CBS Interactive that has all of this really powerful first-party data to really shine. So the scale of our audience segments will get smaller, but what we think will happen is that the value of the segments will increase. So, you know, like your classic supply and demand. So we think that all of our first-party data will become very valuable.
Erica, we have a question for you here at BlackRock.
Yeah.
The first party data that we're utilizing, that's like stuff from our like fantasy net. So with cookies getting eliminated, will you see that we'll have a lot of data that dries up too?
I think that we might have some, but we are working on some device graphs and other things that won't require cookies that will help us tackle this.
Okay. And then from like marketplace where they're utilizing like data to target too, and I think that we have that on news now. Is that going to be affected? Like, will that be gone, or is that completely separate because it's like their information through Roku?
Yeah, I think that the Roku stuff is primarily their first party data, but what we have a group that's looking at all of our partners and making sure that they're all going to be compliant as well.
Okay.
Yeah, like the second party, like data sharing agreements where we're taking the first party from someone and taking our first party data and like mashing that into a segment, like that's still going to be okay. It's more like using like an Exalate that's been a third party vendor that we would that's been plugged into our DMP that we would leverage for like gender or age or household income. A lot of those guys are going to get hit pretty hard in this new world. So those are the ones that we weren't going to be as reliant on. And so that's the area that I'm most concerned about, because there's a couple pockets where we've got that demographic information, like age, gender, location, but it's not consistent across the board. And so that's what we're working on internally to try to like fill in those gaps. So if a client's looking to target like females like 18 to 34, we're not just like shrugging our shoulders being like, shucks, I wish we had that, because that'd be bad.
What is the time frame on CCPA?
It's going into effect at the start of this year, but you're going to be liable back to July 1st of 2019. So basically, next week is at the end of next week is when like we're technically supposed to have like a lot of our stuff in order. So Amy's been working on this quite a bit. Like Josh Moffat and I built a list of questions that we've sent over to legal. We're having a meeting tomorrow morning with them just to understand how this impacts our processes and what we do. On yesterday, I had a meeting with Brandon Seltrick just to better understand what outside companies that we're working with in terms of doing like consent management. So in this new world, any website you go to, they're going to have this like thing along the top that says like, we're tracking you, and do you want to basically look at all the different vendors that are basically capturing your information on this site. And if you click OK, you can go in and be like, I don't want to be tracked by Oracle, but it's okay to be tracked by Adobe. I don't want to be tracked by LinkedIn or Facebook, and you can just go in and like deselect those things. And then that basically eliminates their ability to track you on that site. So that there's going to be some changes in terms of the overall user experience, the partners that we work through in terms of like how we basically provide those choices to users, and then we have to process that information as well.
Is that going to be based on like an IP address situation? And then do we know if that's going to be like kind of refreshed? So for instance, like if user A logs in on Monday, deselects CBS, then starting Tuesday or the next time they log on, like at the back half of that day, we're automatically like brought back into the fold and we can continue to see them.
No, like once they say like, I don't want to be tracked anymore, then that's it. We're supposed to like never track them again. But that's the questions that we have for legal. Like, is there, and part of this too is that the CCPA, like not all of the rules are completely answered just yet. So there's some things where like we just don't know. And there's some things that just aren't like able to be done that they've written into the law as well. Like right now, it's written in a way that I live in California, like I live in San Francisco. I'm here in New York. I'm a California resident, so I need to be treated based on the CCPA. But no website's going to know that I'm a California resident and going to their website. So how are they going to treat me based on that law? So there's some stuff that's just like crazy town. But based on how it's written right now, that yes, like once you deselect it, you're done until you basically go back in and say, I do want to be tracked. So that has big implications, obviously. And part of it is like the wording of things that I think are going to be really important. Like part of it is like how we got there in the first place. Like if you say to somebody, hey, do you want your login information to be stored so you don't have to remember your password every time and you could just get right in to the site that you visit a lot? People would be like, yeah. But if you say, hey, do you want to be tracked on the internet? They're like, fuck no, like that's scary. So I think that we've gotten ourselves in a little bit of trouble because of like how some of this stuff is positioned to people versus like it being the negative versus the positive.
How knowledgeable do you think agencies and clients will be around this? Or do you think it's going to be?
I think like
to really agree.
We've fielded several data RFIs over the last like month. So I think it's picking up. I think agencies are starting to poke around and try to better understand like what this all means. I think overall we're in a really good position because of our scale and size that for some of these smaller players, I think they're going to get like hit pretty hard. We just have to make sure that our data's organized in such a way that we can take advantage of our scale and not be like just splintered into these disparate parts of the individual BUs based on what we know. But from what I learned with Brandon yesterday, we're definitely taking this aggregated view. And even if our data sits in different places, they're almost like putting this layer of peanut butter on top that like links it all together. But I would say that, yeah, like in the next 6 months, I would expect you to get lots of questions about this, which is why we're working on this FAQ doc so that you guys can, intelligently answer how we're going about all this. And I learned a lot from the GDPR process last year, and we're trying to kind of atone for those sins of it because I think we could have been a little bit more efficient and nimble in terms of how we got our communication kind of together. So.
Right, we have a question here at BlackRock.
Yeah, go for it.
From a sales perspective, like how will this benefit us? Like, is there any, I know you're mentioning like smaller companies, this, might get hit hard, but like, how can we leverage this for our clients to be like, come work with us? Because this, like, I don't know, Facebook always has stuff where they're like taking every information about you. Like, is this going to affect like Facebook a lot? Like, I'm just trying to understand it from that perspective where we can leverage and be like, come work with us because we're compliant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what I would say is I would highlight the fact that we're a top 10 internet property from our overall scale perspective. I would highlight the number of unique visitors that we get across the board and the fact that we've got these databases that are already like pre-built where we know a lot about our users, like our fantasy sports database, the fact that we have this robust B2B database, that we've got Giant Bomb on the gaming side, like that we have like newsletter subscribers kind of across the board. There's all these places where we've been able to like really learn and garner information around our users that will help us still be able to hit them in this new world. So I would definitely tout the scale that we have. There's a lot of things that I don't think are ready for prime time that we're also kind of working on in the back end. One that Erica alluded to is an identity graph. So that this basically allows us to work around the cookie and basically identify people based on like a hash email address or an IP address that we can identify them as an individual that is like one of our visitors across our sites and be able to target them based on that way. So we're not just like waiting for this new world to happen and then be like, oh shit, we got to do something. We're proactively working towards a solution where we're not reliant on a cookie in order to still provide a layer of targeting to that client's advertising. So but in the meantime, what I would do is basically say that we're working on developing our overall communication with our legal team. We've been working on this for many moons, so we're not behind the game, and that like our scale in this new world is going to be able to help them still hit their target audiences.
Thanks. Is there like, I guess, is there like a competitor though that you think is gonna get like hit hard with this that like we should be aware of?
No, I think what's going to happen is that, like, and this is a conversation that I've been having with some folks internally as well, but you have these walled gardens in terms of like Facebook and Google, and I think that's what's going to start to happen in our industry is that like you aren't going to be able to leverage or access data outside of the little world in which a company kind of operates. And I think right now we haven't like put anything in place where like CBSi is not a walled garden where, you know, for strategic clients, like we're looking to leverage data and work together with clients. And I think that that is something that we could kind of lean on like to address some of the frustrations that clients may have in terms of like really knowing how well their stuff is performing and really extracting the right data to make those optimization changes, at least for the time being. Like in, you know, a year and a half's time, could we become a walled garden based on how we see everything shake out? Maybe, but I don't know off the top of my head like what other companies are doing, so I can't say that like, oh, you know, Vice is totally effed because they're a shit show. Like, I don't know. I mean, you could make that up, like, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's all.
It's like programmatic.
So Bree just asked how this would impact the programmatic side. So yeah, if you're like, you could still do open exchange and like, and you know, that is going to be untargeted and just you know, more at a category level. I think where as long as if a client's looking to leverage an audience segment and apply that to programmatic, that's still fine because that's the client's first party data that they could then just apply to that inventory. So programmatic guaranteed, PMP type things, like I don't see that being impacted.
Sorry, you said when this goes into effect, we'll work retroactively to it starting July 2019?
That's how far we have, like, the question was like, when do we have to be compliant to CCPA? What they said is that it goes into effect January 1st, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get like pinched and they start like poking around whether you violated something, you have to have your data in order in like organized all the way back to July of 2019.
Got it. So, like effectively, like we can still move forward with Bombora and HD data and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, for the next, and even then, like I had a call with Bombora 2 weeks ago. Like they're moving into this world as well of like moving away from cookie-based tracking, and like there's already conversations that they're having around what this co-op basically will then lead to. They're looking to create basically the same thing that I was just talking about is an identity graph across all their co-op partners that once again is more reliant on like a hashed email or an IP address and not a cookie, and to then be able to identify those people across the different co-op sites. Any other questions? Alrighty. What's the next one?
Don't be an idiot.
All right, don't be an idiot. So you guys have heard us talk about 5G and IoT for a while. I found this study by Verizon Media that I thought was really important because it was really the marketing implications for what 5G is going to do. Like you guys have all heard like 5G makes things faster and like there's going to be less latency, but like what does it mean from a marketing standpoint? So basically the video streaming experience is going to get better for people that are on 5G. So the consumption of something like All Access is going to be a better overall user experience. The ability to consume like bigger creative formats is also something. So we just rolled out recently the video streaming unit within a skybox. Like that overall experience you could expect to get a lot better within the 5G realm. And then augmented reality being another one, the pipes just being bigger in terms of what you can push. So I'm very happy to report that on Monday, we signed the deal officially with Unity, which is something I've kind of talked about with you guys in the past. It was mentioned within the upfront pitch. We have a press release that just got approved by Mark D. And so we're putting the finishing touches on that. So you'll probably see something go out, hopefully out there in the interwebs over the next week or so. But that's another experience, like users being able to play around with AR in a more immersive type way. So all of this like really leads to there being a bunch of money flowing into the space. And so that bottom stat around how it will basically drive like over $1 trillion into this media entertainment industry based on these more positive experiences is where we see like the big value. So it's the equivalent of feeding a fire person a little piece of charcoal and seeing them explode. So what are the overall implications? Like, you know, I mentioned this already, like just if we're creating premium content, these are more higher quality premium content experiences. And so what we're trying to think about when we're building our overall roadmap from the product side is like, how do we like further enhance that and really push the envelope on things? And then just like, what are the different media touch points that are going to be opened up? So like they're saying that 5G is going to help improve the self-driving and autonomous vehicles. So with that being the case, that then opens up like a new media touch point where you could be consuming video content as you're kicked back, driving from point A to point B, but not ever touching the steering wheel. So how we can like basically distribute our content within these new platforms and then really plus up those overall content experiences I think are going to be key. And then mobile just being, you know, all the more important just in terms of powering those overall experiences. The one potential downside, and you know, Bree asked about programmatic. This is one spot where I've read about there being flags where is the programmatic space set up right now from an infrastructure standpoint to deal with the speed at which the calls are going to need to be made. So that decisioning process is going to be key. They don't see it as like the death of programmatic or anything, but just something that with that speed of consumption, there's a lot of calls that will need to have to be made as you're layering targeting to like deliver that correct user experience. So the things that we want you guys out there selling and kind of talking about is that we're really trying to eat our own dog food as it relates to not only covering this content from an editorial perspective, but the fact that this technology is kind of rolling out behind us as well. So we already have editorial areas like our 5G sponsorship on CNET, IoT topic sponsorships on our B2B sites, and like the value that we can really provide to driving leads for companies that are interested in 5G and IoT on the B2B side as well. So doing ABM campaigns related to that. But we're also working on ad formats that are going to be better set up within this new processing environment. So talked about the Unity stuff, but then also like related to the Adam Leary, Eric Collier team, really how we could better fuel content personalization and then like even new video ad formats on top of just like the pre-roll stuff that we have today, like overlays and whatnot. So there's a lot of things that I think will even set up these better overall user experiences as more cities kind of start to tap into these 5G connections. Questions here? Okay.
Yeah, one left.
Yeah, I guess like to what extent would you say 5G would make an impact in terms of live streaming and the latency, particularly pertaining to any sort of delay between digital live streaming and broadcast television? Yeah,
I think that's going to be massively improved within that overall 5G setup, and that they've talked about that latency just being better not only for live streaming but things like virtual reality. I was just at E3 last year, and I mean last week and last year, but more relevantly last week, where Oculus had a big setup, and it was kind of fun. They had these glass rooms where you could watch people interacting with VR, but the big bet is obviously 5G getting rolled out so that people won't like experience as much lag and latency, and those physical kind of detriments to like being in a VR world for too long a period of time will be lessened. But yeah, I think the streaming of like sports content and just event content in general will be massively improved there. Okay, we probably have time for one more.
Voice.
All right. we're gonna do voice. Erica, you wanna take it?
Great, yeah. So voice, and especially how people are going to be searching on voice, is a trend that we are very much focused on. So I think, why we think it's a trend, kind of obvious. Half of adults are using voice in some way. So I think a lot of times you think about voice and you're thinking about the smart speakers, your Amazon Echoes, your Google Home, but it's also your voice assistant on your phone or with any of your, connected devices. So it's very embedded in our lives. It's just becoming a natural part of the devices that we interact with. It's projected that 50% of all searches will be voice searches by the end of next year, which is a crazy stat. So instead of people typing in, they're just going to be shouting out to their speaker or their phone and asking a question. And I think, people, especially Americans, really enjoy using their smart speakers. So this stat of 39 million smart speaker users, and 65% of them say they wouldn't go back to a non-voice controlled device. And I think there's a ton of opportunity here. It's growing as a commerce solution. So I think that is a huge production. And then we obviously see advertising as a big revenue opportunity there. So from a marketing implication, again, we're really excited about this. I think most marketers see this as a new opportunity to reach consumers, mostly just because of the convenience factor. It's a lot easier to talk into something rather than type it out. But that's going to change a lot of things. So that primarily changes SEO and how we're responding to search results. We think that the questions are going to get longer. They're going to be more conversational rather than typing in keywords and trying to find the result the way you would on your phone or your laptop. And we think that this will have a big impact on local searches. So a lot of local businesses will have to find that relevance based off of your location and try to show their worth there. So what you guys can sell now, so podcasts, which is going to be the new thing that you hear me talk about all the time. So we're going to be talking about podcasts next week in CBSi College. We'll give you guys a deeper dive on that and the opportunities around that, but that's something you guys can take out today and start selling. Not only would it be on your phone in the normal places that you consume podcasts, but our podcasts are also distributed through those outlets on smart speakers and other devices. We can also sell live reads baked into some of our Alexa skills and our Google Actions. So CNET has the Tech Today Alexa skill where you can have a presented by advertiser hard-coded into that. And then we're also thinking about voice-related projects for specific companies. So you guys are all familiar with what we did last year on the sports side with Google Assistant, creating a fantasy action. We're open to developing those types of things for both Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all of those players. And we could also develop skills that are custom and sponsored by a non-manufacturer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. We're also going to continue to pursue this as a bigger advertising opportunity and inserting ads and inserting audio ads. But until then, these are kind of those three opportunities that you guys can take out. Any questions on voice?
Yeah, Erica, I have one just relating to the podcast, and this might be getting ahead of ourselves since you say the next college presentation is on it. But would the ad opportunities be strictly like pre-roll, mid-roll, or would it be the option to natively integrate the actual client itself into the podcast opportunity?
Yeah, so the ad served opportunities are they can be host read, so they can be endorsed, which is, I think, the really big pull with podcasts. They will be pre-roll, mid-roll. I think some of our longer form content, we do have sponsorships, so we'll do custom segments, but you'd have to develop those with the site strategy and client solutions team.
Cool. Something that we've also done as well on the Studio 61 side, where we've replied to some RFPs to develop custom podcasts for clients. So if that would be of interest, if as we roll out all the different podcasts that are available to be sponsored, if there's still a topic area or something that the client wants to be aligned in, that's something that we could create for clients as well.
So outside of CNET, what do you have in the pipe for podcast distribution? because I know CNET has like the 359 podcast.
Yep.
We did a podcast on B2B, and that was kind of just distributed through like our Tech Republic resource library. So cross sites, like, are we gonna have a dedicated podcast section? Are we like partnering with anyone?
Yeah, Erica,
Yeah.
did you hear that just in terms of what the distribution is?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So 359 is a great example. I would say the sports brands have a ton of podcasts. They actually have, I think, over 30 at this point. And a lot of them are really big brands that they've developed into their own social handles, and they have their own standalone newsletters and their own video distribution across the sites. So I think we'll spend a little bit more time getting into some of those next week. But in addition to tech, the games brands also have podcasts. Sports, news has quite a few podcasts as well that are managed by the broadcast team. So we have a lot of different opportunities. And then I think for distribution, that's one of the things that we're trying to establish the best practices. So we just recently partnered with Megaphone, which is the platform we're using to publish our podcasts and distribute them, as well as our monetization platform. And as part of this partnership with Megaphone, they actually send our podcast feeds out to all of the big players. So we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, Stitcher, and then we can embed them into our own sites and our own app products. So that's, a sort of a method of the best practices that we're trying to streamline across the organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we can crank through one more. Do you guys want to do games or cause-based?
Based.
Oh.
You got enough votes.
All right, we're going into games. All right, so just a couple of things. Like I said, E3 was just last week. There's a bunch of interest in this space, and esports being one of the areas. So I think a lot of clients are asking about this right now, and as you can see in the sub-bullet, like it's not just the endemics that are leaning in, but non-endemic brands are starting to increase their openness to this as well. And as we look at other demographic groups, like especially the younger generations, they're really more receptive to these non-traditional sports, seeing that they're more quote unquote relevant to my generation. One of the big things that I think the gaming endemics kind of get hung up on, and some of the kind of misperceptions is that this is just like a male focused industry that like for people like 18 to 34, and it's really not the case. And I don't think that the industry itself has come around as much as it could, in just in terms of representing other like cultures and the female like demographic into the mix. But some of the stats that we found super interesting was 72% of women play games on their smartphones, and this is the same proportion as men. And then some of the game publishers are starting to catch on, but we see that like with Fortnite being one of the big crazes, at the time that I pulled this report, 45 million players, they said almost half of their players are women. And one of the reasons for that is that they have prominent female characters, which some games just don't have. So that sense of being able to relate within the game that you're playing is important. So some of the implications, and this was referenced within Ben Howard's trends presentation as well, but I think people still see the entertainment industry, like movie studios and whatnot, as being this place where it's ripe for integration and like where they should be putting their money. But like the launch of games and the revenue that's generated dwarfs any like movie release, like even the highest ones like an Avengers or a Star Wars. And you see this even within some of the influencers that are starting to pop within the gaming space as well. So I started thinking about this from an athlete perspective, and I looked at Ninja, who's like obviously one of the biggest kind of influencers within the gaming world. He made like $6 million last year. And then I looked at the median income for like a Major League Baseball player, an NBA player, and it's a fraction of that. So the ability to like tap into a gaming influencer will bring you a lot more bang for your buck than trying to get some athlete in a lot of cases. And as I mentioned before, there's just not a lot of people effectively targeting a wider swath of users that they basically could within this vertical. So really any target audience I think could be tied to gaming just based on the content that is obviously being consumed and the type of game and whatnot. So the things that we want you guys to be focused on, like the good news is that when you look at 2019 so far, games has done massively well. The amount of revenue that they're generating has been solid, like Q1 and Q2. And we started to see really good increases in the number of non-endemic clients that are starting to come in just based on this like excitement around the industry and the growth overall. So I would say continue to pitch non-endemic clients across the board, whether it's the gaming rig or PAX or like the different Comic-Cons that are in the different cities around the country. I talked about Unity already, so there's going to be more to come on that next week in Quick Hits to coincide with the press release that's going out. We'll have some basics for you guys so that you guys can start talking to clients about this. And then following like in the coming weeks after the 4th of July holiday, we're going to give you guys some specific ideas that you guys could pitch within the augmented reality space as well, because we see a lot of opportunity here. And like I think almost every week in media posts, there's another brand dabbling in AR and looking to kind of play around in this space. And I think we have a seat at the table now as well that we could really do some fun things. A lot of our data sharing agreements have been on the CNET side or the tech side, I would say. And I've talked a lot about with like Paul Firmerman, for example, but there's a lot of opportunities for us to like leverage our first party data and work with clients within this realm. So if you hear clients talk about that, know that that's something that we're open to and can lean into. And then on the partnership side, like the overall work that Caitlin's been doing has been awesome, but like we haven't had many conversations specific to the gaming realm. So if you see opportunities there, definitely hit us up. Just around deeper integrations within the site, there's a lot of things that we could potentially do.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
I'd also say for things that you can sell, the tentpoles are always big, but also game releases are like another key, like other key moments on the site. So moving into Q3 and Q4 is when we see most of the big releases coming out. So as far as looking for like pop culture moments that matter to, like he said, most demographics, video game releases are big ones. So we can work with you too, depending on your flight, to determine what those big games are and then put together like ownership packages that, we can use. Even if your client doesn't have a gaming focus, to say this is what people are going to be talking about in Q3 and Q4, or 19 to 34 or whatever. So I would throw big titles in there too, along with tentpoles.
Do we have any, do we have a consolidated list of what our sites are going to actually be doing any type of reviews or
we always do
promotionals
reviews.
for? Or?
We know like there are like a handful of big titles that we know, especially coming out of E3, that our editors are excited for, that we know will have a lot of buzz from our audience and get a lot of coverage on our site. So we can kind of work with you to develop packages around them.
Well, we could maybe follow up with like some of the
like
second half
Borderlands
releases.
3, and there's a new Star Wars coming out. Like there's definitely a handful of titles that we can share more broadly to be aware of in their timing.
Sweet.
Yeah, one of the like Lego, they're doing a Lego Star Wars thing where you could play across every single movie within the franchise. That was something at E3 last week that I thought was super cool.
Mhm.
And that's coming out later this year, right? Or is that,
So might be early 2020.
Okay.
I have to look.
they're put an asterisk next to what I just said. but yeah. Cool. So in terms of next steps, like we'll obviously distribute this deck. If you guys have ideas around any of these categories or just want to know more, definitely hit us up. We're happy to talk about this stuff for hours on end. We'll continue to work behind the scenes in terms of building out new products that you guys can pitch out there. But I think looping us into the RFP process, I think, is important because there's always things that we have kind of percolating behind the scenes that we could throw out there as a like will build if sold, or like to say if a client has like a little bit of a longer flight window that we could like launch during their overall campaign. So definitely, keep us in the loop on that stuff. And then we'll be following up in Q3 with an updated trend report, most likely definitely with a different theme, but then also like with different overall trends that we're kind of talking about. So we're not just continuing to go back to the same things over and over again, unless there's something massively material within there that we think it's important to kind of talk about. But But yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.